Good morning. So I had one person that was having some troubles getting on. I'm just going to give him a second to get into the WebEx, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, good morning. It is so good to see each of you. Thank you so much. It's Friday, so it feels really good that it's the end of the week. I want to welcome each of you to the I-81 committee meeting. It's been a while since we've come together, so it's really good to see all of your faces and enjoy this time together. So I want to just go through one thing, and then before we get going with the election of chair and vice chair, we'll have a few remarks by Secretary Valentine. So in light of the continuing state of emergency declared by Governor Northam, where it is impracticable or unsafe to assemble a quorum in a single location, I move that we discuss or transact the business that's statutorily required or necessary to continue operation of the I-81 committee. So I wanted to make sure that we state that. And moving forward, I want to go over the roll call and make sure that we have everyone present. Delegate Goditis.
Present.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Delegate Sewell. And you may be on mute.
I'm sorry, Ronique, this Delegate Will, there was some other noise. Did you call my name?
I didn't, but thank you. I have you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I couldn't hear what you said.
Thank you. I have you. Delegate Hurst.
Hey, I'm present.
Good morning. Senator Edwards.
Here, I'm here.
Great. Senator Deeds. Senator Pillion.
I'm here.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Mr. Friedman.
I'm here. Good morning.
Good morning. Mr. Bestfitch.
Here.
Good morning. Mr. Maslaney.
Here. Good morning.
And Mr. Morris. Green.
Did you say Green?
I did. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Here.
Mr. Smoot.
Good morning. Here.
Very good. So we have a quorum, and that's everyone present for the 81 committee meeting. So with that,
Madam
I'm sorry.
Clerk, I'm sorry, I missed it. Delegate Rasul is present.
Good morning. Thank you. And with that, I'll turn it over to Secretary Valentine.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank
Good
you.
morning.
Glad everyone made it. That was really an impressive array who actually checked in this morning. So good morning to everyone. I know that we would not be here today without so many of you on this call and a part of this meeting. To get to this moment, it required great leadership from Governor Northam, from the legislators who are here with us today, to the community leaders across the 81 corridor, to businesses, associations, the trucking industry. This was a true collaborative effort, and I thank each and every one of you for the commitments you have made to this. It's challenging to start things today without recognizing that we are all indeed living through an unprecedented time. And so your willingness to be a part of this committee at this time is important and just so appreciated. Since February, across the entire administration and certainly across the entire secretariat, the focus has been on the health and safety of our employees, our customers, our partners, moving essential personnel, moving critical goods, the collaboration and the logistics between the Port of Virginia, the trucking industry, rail, transit, all modes of transportation to move people and connect people to essential work, medicine, food, PPE, and to contribute to the stability of our economy has been a priority within the sector. And I just thank every day the workers who are often the quiet ones in the background, a part of our transportation platform who do such meaningful work. So just want to acknowledge so much of what has been done. As we continue to focus on health and safety, we are also addressing the impacts of COVID-19 on our state government and in transportation. For those of you who are here today, many of you will remember Governor Northam and Secretary of Finance Aubrey Lane addressing the money committees of the General Assembly, letting everyone know that the predictions were that through FY22, the Commonwealth was going to be down about $2.7 billion. Transportation was going to be down about $870 million over this 2-year period through FY22. And for those of you on the call, most of you, I believe, are aware of a program we call Smart Scale. And to put $870 million into perspective, in the most recent round of Smart Scale, which is our prioritization process in which we choose our new capacity projects, we had, for a 2-year period, for the entire Commonwealth, $850 million. So addressing $870 million is a significant reduction in transportation. Our team, looking at what other states were preparing to do in cutting projects, delaying projects, laying off workforce, we try to keep as our main focus maintaining our current pipeline of projects. We wanted to find a way where we could maintain our priorities and infrastructure, maintain our workforce, and do what we could to stabilize economic recovery. And I give a great deal of credit to people on this call, Deputy Secretary Nick Donahue, Deputy Secretary John Lawson, CFO Laura Farmer, among all of our CFOs, Steve Pittard and DRPT, working to test and retest all budget scenarios to try to determine how we could manage this. And what we were able to do is introduce a budget amendment through Governor Northam and introduced into the General Assembly during this special session that gives the Commonwealth Transportation Board the flexibility over the 2-year period, a very narrow time frame, where we could adjust our allocations so that those projects that received allocations in years 1 and 2 but did not require the funding according to their own schedule until years 3, 4, 5, and 6, we were able to put those dollars to work today and then restore them within the 6-year window. So in transportation, we're very fortunate because we work with a 6-year planning program. And so with that flexibility of putting those dollars to work today, not required until the later years, it's really a cash management approach. We are able to maintain our projects in the pipeline, maintain our workforce, and I believe help continue to contribute to economic stability and recovery. All of the projects remain in the 6-year window, on time and on schedule. That has been a priority, and I believe that with the information that we have today, given that there's great uncertainty in our world, that this is the smartest approach at this time. And we will be updating the governor and the General Assembly on exactly how that is done within our 6-year planning window. As a part of that 6-year window is the I-81 Corridor Improvement Program, and that is why you are here today. Of the 56 projects identified in the 81 Corridor Improvement Plan, 40 of them are already in the 6-year planning window. 8 have been completed. 32 are in some phase of design, pre-engineering, environmental, or construction. Very early on, and when I say very early on, it was July 1st of 2019, the day we could enact any of the program funds to I-81. Commissioner Britch deployed resources and got operational improvements out the door very early, which includes certain things like static and flashing chevrons, safety service patrol enhancements, traffic cameras. And I'm very proud to say that those operational improvements did receive a regional award. And these improvements along the 81 corridor are now named as a top 12 national finalist in America's Transportation Awards, sponsored by AASHTO, AAA, and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. There's a great deal of work that has been done and has continued to be done pre-COVID, during COVID, and will remain. You have an incredible lineup today with great people. You're going to get an update on the capital program from David Covington, who is our I-81 program delivery director. You're going to get a multimodal presentation from Emily Stock, manager of rail planning. You will be getting an update from on truck parking from Kathy McGee, who is our director of research and innovation across the entire Transportation Secretariat, and a finance overview from the VDOT CFO, Laura Farmer. You are, of course, joined by the ex officio members of Director Jennifer Mitchell and Commissioner Steve Britch from VDOT. You are being led and by Ronique Day, who is the Deputy Director of our Office of Intermodal Planning and Investment. Ronique is our main liaison with you, your main liaison with us. She has been managing this committee and has done an excellent job. You couldn't be in better hands with Ronique. And of course, Deputy Secretaries Donahue and Lawson, who will be with you, always with you whenever you need them to be there. You have the best and the brightest, and I'm hoping that this meeting is very meaningful and a great update for everyone. As always, my door is open. I look forward to the progress that we are able to make together. I look forward to your thoughts and concerns and recommendations going forward, and really appreciate you all making this commitment during this time. And so with that, I wish I could see everybody, because I do see Senator Edwards up on my screen. I wish I could see all of you. My husband and I have moved to Charlottesville. We still have our home in Lynchburg. My husband started teaching at UVA to cardiology fellows. So we have this little townhouse, and my husband is on a Zoom call in the office, and I am coming to you from a closet, and I'm looking at the background, and I go, God, it's really hard to make this closet look good right now. But I just really thank you. And with that, Ronique, I am going to turn this over to Deputy Secretary Nick Donahue.
Thank you, Madam Secretary.
Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning, members of the committee. The Secretary has asked me to help facilitate the next item on the agenda. And again, that item is the election of chair and vice chair. Both chair, former vice chair, both rotated off the committee at this time. And so before we move into the base of the agenda here, we would like to work with the committee for that. Quick reminder, a simple majority constitutes a decision of the committee. There are 15 members of this committee. I believe all but 2 are currently present. As we are meeting virtually, Ms. Day will go through a roll call on that are out there. And just as I know we do have some new members to the committee. This committee is established in law. It was created in the legislation the General Assembly passed in 2019. Provide advice and recommendations to the Commonwealth Transportation Board on the Interstate program, which the board does update on an annual basis. Further, it's also to be coordinated with and provide input of any updates that you for the plan, which was based on identified the initial set of improvements. There's an expectation that as time moves on and these first improvements are built, future updates to that plan will take place, and obviously this committee would play a major role in those updates. So with that, the floor is open to any motions or nominations. Start with chair, if there are any potential nominations that are out there, and again, the floor is open.
Thank you, Nick. This is Delegate Hurst. I would love to nominate Delegate Gudaitis for chair. She is new to the committee, but not new to this issue, and I think would serve wonderfully in that capacity as chair for Delegate Gudaitis. That's my motion for nomination.
I will second that motion. This is Delegate Rasul.
Thank you. We do have a motion that was properly made and seconded there to nominate Delegate Gudaitis to serve as chair of the Interstate 81 Committee. Ms. Day, prior to calling the roll, I just want to see if there are any comments that any other folks would like to make before we move forward with a roll call. Speaking, just a quick reminder, you are on mute. We cannot hear you. Just want to say that in case anyone's trying to chime in. I'm not hearing any comments.
Nick, I'm sorry, Nick, we're having a problem hearing you.
Yes.
So coming in and out.
My apologies. Sorry, I was asking if prior before we move forward with the roll call vote, I wanted to see if there are any comments that folks might like to make, and just wanted to give the opportunity for that.
Okay.
Hearing none, I think Ms. Day, at this time it'd be appropriate to move forward with the roll call.
Delegate Wilt.
Aye.
Senator Edwards. Senator Pillion. Pillion.
Aye.
Just in case you all may be on mute.
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Friedman.
Aye.
Mr. Gross. I'm sorry, Mr. Bestovich.
Aye.
Mr. Meslaney.
Aye.
Mr. Green.
Aye.
Mr. Smoot.
Aye.
Okay, and because of the mute and unmute and some things with sound, did I miss anyone?
Yeah, you may have missed me, John Edwards. I vote aye. I don't know if you heard me
Yes.
or not.
I have you now. Thank you very much. That completes the roll.
Well, thank you. It sounds as if there was a unanimous vote there. So, Delegate Gudaitis, congratulations. You have now been elected chair of the 81 committee. Ms. Day and myself will remain on the call to help as we move through the remaining agenda items. But at this time, I'd like to turn the meeting over to you as chair for the election of vice chair.
Thank you very much, Nick. Thank you, Ronique. Thank you, everyone. Vice Chair, do I hear any nominations for Vice Chair?
Madam Chair, this is Delegate Hurst. I would like to nominate our esteemed senior member, Senator John Edwards, to be Vice Chair.
We have a nomination for Senator Edwards for vice chair. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion properly seconded. And I guess at this point, we will do a roll call, Vernique?
Yes. Delegate Rousseau.
Aye.
Delegate Will.
Aye.
Senator Pillion.
Aye.
Mr. Friedman.
Aye.
Mr. Bestfitch.
Aye.
Mr. Maslany.
Aye.
Mr. Green.
Aye.
And Mr. Smoot.
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much. The roll call is complete.
Madam Chair. Madam Chair, this is Shannon Valentine. I just want to say congratulations to you and Senator Edwards. Thank you so much. And I'm here to help as much as possible. Have a great day.
Shannon?
Did we lose her?
Shannon?
Yes?
You were generous in recognizing the work of others who have made today possible. We also need to recognize your exceptional efforts over the past several years, really, to move the I-81 project along. The strong leadership you have given to this has benefited our entire region along the I-81 corridor, and I want you to know it is appreciated.
Well, Mr. Smoot, can you hear me?
I can.
So thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. It's so important. So it was a great day when we all managed to get this through. So I thank you for that. But I'm not sure that Madam Chair heard my comments or our Vice Chair, but I just thank you, Delegate Gudaitis and Senator Edwards, for taking on this leadership role. Thank you. Have a great day.
Have a good day.
Thank you, Secretary Valentine. She has certainly done a wonderful job for us out here in the West. So we have a vice chair. It sounds like, I'm not sure we quite finished that process, and I heard a unanimous vote for Senator Edwards as vice chair. So that's good news. And now that we have a chair and a vice chair, we will move along with the agenda. And I guess that means approval of minutes.
I move the minutes.
You're muted, Vernique.
So sorry.
I move-
Madam Chair, if we can just ask everyone to mute. And then once we get the motion passed, if everyone can go back on mute, we're getting a lot of background noise.
Okay, is everyone muted now? Good. Go ahead, Vernique.
I think we're going to move the motion.
Is the motion on the approval of minutes?
I so move.
This is Frank. I'll second the motion.
Thank you. We have a properly seconded motion to approve the minutes from October 1st, 2019. And go ahead.
Delegate Rousseau? Okay, I'm sorry. It looks like there's a lot of background noise. I'm just going to go ahead and go on mute. We have a properly motioned on the minutes, so I'll go back on mute and then we'll continue with the agenda.
Wendy, you're muted.
Can you hear me? It doesn't look muted to me. Okay, thank you. We'll go ahead with item number 4, which is the Interstate 81 Corridor Improvement Program status with our director, David Covington from VDOT. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. I'd like to provide you with a brief update on the status of the program for the capital and operational projects. If we can advance to the next slide, I'd like to begin this discussion with a topic that is probably on most people's minds. What was the impact to the traffic along the I-81 corridor during this COVID pandemic? You see here a graph that demonstrates the impacts to traffic in all three of our districts along the I-81 corridor. This is broken down by all vehicle types. This includes passenger vehicles and trucks. And I would ask that you pay close attention to the scale of the graph on the left side because it will change across the next three slides. But this gives a representation that beginning in early March, around March 1st, we had a significant decline in overall traffic along the corridor in all three districts, very similar spread across each of the three districts. We see that beginning in late April, early May, we see a recovery, a steady recovery back toward a normal. However, as of late last month, we had not quite reached the exact same values that we had in traffic last year. If we advance to the next slide, we will see a different breakdown of this same data. This focuses on passenger vehicles, and you will see a very similar shape in this decline and recovery of traffic. Again, around the beginning of March, a significant decline, dropping nearly to 60% of the traffic that we had the same time last year. And then that recovery, not quite reaching back to the 0% bar or equivalent to what we had in 2019. If we move to the last traffic impact slide, we will see a slightly different story. This focuses only on truck volume. So we see again around March 1st, we see that decline with the most significant being around the beginning to middle of April with nearly a 30% decline in traffic. However, we see a rapid recovery. In addition to that, we see that the volumes as of the end of September exceed the volumes that we had in 2019. So this demonstrates that while we did have a significant drop in passenger vehicle traffic and a recovery that has not quite matched the volumes from 2019, we do see that the truck volumes have recovered quite well and have exceeded the volumes from 2019. So I wanted everybody to get a picture of what the impacts related to COVID were, where they were focused most heavily, and that the truck volume means that freight has continued to move within and through Virginia. So that is some positive news. As we move forward, we will get an update on the capital improvement projects. So if we can advance to the next slide, please. As the Secretary mentioned, we have 56 projects that are currently within the program. These are capital improvement projects. These are our significant projects. We have 40 that are within our 6-year improvement program. We have 16 projects that are what we term out-year projects. They are not scheduled to begin any sort of design or progress until roughly 2023 to 2025. That leaves us with 40 projects that are currently under some sort of design or construction or have been completed. So 32 projects are currently in the design phase. We have 8 projects that are completed. We had 5 ramp extension projects in the Staunton district. We had two ramp extension projects in the Bristol district and 1 in the Salem district. So we have had significant progress and we'll continue to see that progress, progressing projects on or ahead of schedule. Next slide, please. So I'd like to provide you with a breakdown now of per district, where the status, where we are with the status with each district. In Bristol district, we currently have 7 projects that are under design by our internal VDOT staff. We are making good use of our internal resources to deliver these projects efficiently. We have 6 projects that are under design by on-call consultants. So we have statewide on-call design contracts that we utilize. It's very quick to implement. We have two projects that are under design by project-specific consultants. These are slightly larger projects that we put out for procurement because we do want a diversity of delivery methods. We want to spread this not only across VDOT staff using central office resources and district resources, but also across the consultant industry. We have one design build project that is currently under design that we are planning to advertise December of this year or January of next year. And we, again, have two projects that are complete. So the summary is, of the 18 current 6-year improvement plan projects that are in the Bristol district, construction. To the next slide, please. Similarly, for the Salem district, we have two projects that are under design by VDOT staff. We don't currently have any under design by on-call consultants at the moment. We have one project that is under design, again, by a project-specific consultant that was procured from the consultant industry. We have two design build projects that are bundled together that have been advertised. We issued the request for qualifications. We have shortlisted the teams, and we are planning to send out the request for proposals hopefully next week. We also have one project, as I mentioned previously, a ramp extension project in the district that is complete. So of the current 6-year improvement program projects in the Salem district, all are currently under design or have completed construction. Next slide, please. Moving on to the Staunton district, we have 6 projects that are currently under design by VDOT staff. We have one project that is under design by an on-call consultant. We have 2 projects that are under design by project-specific consultants, again, recent procurements. We've not yet identified a design build candidate project in the Staunton district. We have 5 projects, as I mentioned previously, where construction is complete. So of the 16 6-year improvement program projects in the district, 14 are currently under design or have completed construction. I will note that 2 projects, which are bundled together, are currently under contract negotiation for design services, and we have begun internal design by VDOT staff, and we'll transition all of that data to the successful consultant, and that is the Weir's Cave truck climbing lanes projects, both northbound and southbound. We advance to the next slide, please. Now a discussion about the operational improvement project status, and these are the projects that Secretary Valentine mentioned that have won the regional award and are up for consideration for the national AASHTO award. The curve improvements, which involve static and flashing chevron signs at some of our most complicated curves along the I-81 corridor, were completed very quickly and very early in the program. In addition to that, enhancements to the Safety Service Patrol have been completed, again, quite early. We were able to secure additional trucks, additional personnel, and extend a lot of the services to routes that we did not have it on previously. That has provided a lot of benefit at relatively minor cost. We also outfitted some of those Safety Service Patrol vehicles with lift and tow devices to enhance our quick clearance efforts. We are implementing a towing and recovery incentive program, which exists in other locations throughout the state. It has been a very successful program. We are trying to implement that along the corridor with a implementation date scheduled for March of next year. We are also installing 51 additional traffic cameras along the I-81 corridor. We currently have 42 cameras that are now available on Virginia 511. We have 8 that are awaiting integration into the 511 system. However, they are viewable and usable for our traffic operations centers, and 1 awaiting electric service installation. In addition to that, we are installing quite a few additional changeable or digital message signs along the corridor to help alert travelers of dangerous conditions or congestion along the interstate. These are currently under construction. slightly ahead of schedule with a fixed completion date of October 28th of next year. Next slide, please. And then arterial improvements. We have a host of arterial improvements that are parallel routes or alternate routes for I-81. If there is an incident on I-81, this is where traffic is diverted. We are performing signal upgrades, specifically in some of the localities along the corridor where we generally have problems when we have incidents on the interstate and creates congestion on the arterial routes and secondary incidents in some cases. These are currently in the planning and design stage, also in close coordination with the localities, because we do need to integrate these signal systems into VDOT's central signal system in all three districts, which is challenging and requires extensive coordination with the localities. We do also have a few parallel route upgrades, which are minor geometric improvements to facilitate access to and from Interstate 81 during incidents. These are currently under design and will be in construction in the very near future. Generally, this involves these very restrictive intersections where tractor trailers have a hard time making a turn, providing them a little additional room to make those turns so that they don't create secondary incidents. Next slide, please. And with regard to communications, this is a critical aspect of this program with the fact that the program spans 325 miles, numerous jurisdictions, 3 different VDOT districts. We knew that communications is going to be a critical component of the success of the program. Early on, we developed a communications plan that is complete, and we have recently updated that based on COVID-19 guidelines, specifically related to how we will handle public involvement and in-person communication events as we move forward with the projects. We have developed a program-specific website, which I encourage you to explore, improve81.org. There's a fantastic app there that provides a lot of detail, as well as informational products such as briefing packages and speakers bureaus. Next slide, please. So our takeaway scorecard, where are we in the program? Again, the first 3 items: curb improvements, the initial acceleration and deceleration or ramp extensions, and safety service patrol are complete. The additional cameras, 51 of those, are nearly complete. As I mentioned, we have all but 1 that has access to the traffic operations centers currently. The additional message signs are underway with a completion date in October of 2021. The arterial upgrades that I just spoke about, those vary by project, but they are generally rather quick projects to implement. And the 32 remaining capital projects are underway with completion dates that vary by project. Next slide, please. So our next steps, continuing the design of the capital improvement projects, completing the traffic camera installations, the electrical service and the VA 511 integration, completing procurement of our first design build projects on the corridor, which is in Salem district, exit 137 to exit 141 northbound and southbound. Advertisement of additional ramp extension projects in the Staunton district, which will occur toward the end of this year. You can see that includes exit 304, exit 296, and exit 291, which will be bundled together into a single construction contract. Awarding project ID 26, which is a construction contract that was advertised September 8th. That is in the Bristol district, mile marker 16.6 to 16.7 southbound. Advertising a single phase design build project in the Bristol district. Beginning the arterial improvements construction, executing the trip program next year. And that concludes my update. I'm happy to entertain any questions that members of the committee may have.
Madam Chair, I have a question. John Edwards here.
Senator Edwards, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Covington, you mentioned something earlier about a lift and towing project of some sort. I didn't get it all. Can you explain what this is all about, this lift and towing project of some sort?
Yes, sir. This is an operational improvement with low cost and high return on investment. Oftentimes, we have lanes that become blocked by disabled vehicles, specifically passenger vehicles. We have outfitted some of our safety service patrol vehicles with this lift and tow device, which makes it very simple for a safety service patrol operator to hook up that disabled vehicle and remove it from the lane so that we can return that lane to service quickly.
That sounds like a great idea because we're frequently driving on 81 and one lane is backed up and the next lane starts getting backed up as well. And so I think the sooner you can get some disabled vehicle up and out, the better. I think that's a great idea.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I have a couple of questions. Dave, you mentioned something about a tow recovery incentive program. What is that?
Yes, that's what we call a program. It's a tow recovery and incentive program where we enter into pre-established agreements with the members of the towing industry. We also require some additional assets that they have on hand and additional resources so that we know that when we have a significant event, for instance, a multiple tractor trailer crash on the interstate, that we can quickly engage these operators who we are already under contract with to come out and bring the resources necessary to very quickly clear that incident so that we're not calling multiple organizations or resources coming. We know that we're getting a team that is resourced to take care of that situation. This has been very successfully implemented in the district, I believe, almost 2 years ago.
Thank you. And one other question, the arterial improvements, is that mostly the timing of the lights so that at rush hour, for example, the cars don't get backed up onto 81, which happens a whole lot in our district up here?
Yes, ma'am. But it goes even further than that. What it involves is we use smart signal systems within VDOT. Some of the localities' signal systems may not quite be up to speed with what we're using. So we are going in and replacing those signal systems through the localities with these smart signal systems, which allow VDOT, when we have an incident and traffic is congested, we can control that signal remotely very quickly from our traffic operations center. We can give green time to the through movement to help clear that congested traffic and then return it back to normal operations. So it is an extremely important tool that we're putting in place to take advantage of every little bit of time that we can get on some of our secondary routes, because we don't have the best detour routes or alternate routes along the I-81 corridor. So this is making them as efficient as possible.
Thank you so much. Do we have any further questions for the director?
Yeah, Madam Chair.
Delegate Wilt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, Mr. Covington, two questions. Since we've been working on this now, my first question is, do you know of any projects that may need to be reprioritized? VDOT did a bang up job in coordinating all that and what we needed to do moving forward. But I'm just wondering, has there been any light shed on areas that anything has changed that, could move any particular project up or down the list of importance? And my second question is, you gave your synopsis there on all the projects that they're, some of their schedules vary, but back some time ago, we got a schedule with each individual project, and it pushed it out when the different phases of that project were to be started and through completion, or at least starting. And so can you say that all the projects are going according to those original projections?
Delegate Will, thank you for these questions. I think they're very important to answer today. I am not aware of any projects that we feel should be reprioritized within the program. Nothing has come to our attention that is problematic or seems to be some sort of flaw. So we are continuing to deliver the program as it exists today. With regard to your second question, we continue to operate off of that schedule that was provided, which is available on our website. We continue to focus on the bonded scenario. If you recall, we had two scenarios, bonded and non-bonded. To date, I believe that we are ahead of schedule on probably every project that is current year projects. We intend to stay ahead of schedule. The only thing that I would say is that, we will wait to see what the financing situation looks like coming out of the General Assembly session and make decisions from there. But our intent is to stay ahead of that schedule and, quite honestly, to move as fast as the funding will allow us.
Thank you so much, Director. I think the progress that has been made is remarkable. I think it's remarkable. And thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
If there are no further questions, we will move on to hearing from our Manager of Rail Planning, Emily Stopp, about multimodal improvements. Emily?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair.
Yes, is that Delegate Rasool?
Yes, ma'am. Just a quick question before we move on to multimodal. Are all of the projects that are funded, I think this is a very obvious answer, but are all the projects that are funded through the newer process going to have, I've gotten several constituents wanting to know, as they're analyzing the awesome new website that we have, newer website that we have, and they're going to go through the same kind of public input process because they're wondering about things like where sound barriers are going to be. I just want to make sure I point them in the right place. And so I would ask that to the presenter, if he can just let me know where to point them.
Yeah, absolutely. The website really is our one-stop shop for information about the Corridor Improvement Program. Certainly, I can be contacted at any time, as well as our district representative. I will say that we will very strictly be following the public involvement process for every single one of these projects. These are no different than any other project that VDOT delivers on a daily basis. So the only challenge to that is addressing public involvement in the COVID environment, which we found some good solutions, which involve virtual events as well as social distancing in public events. Does that answer your question fully?
Yes, thank you. And I think that the website is great. As much information as we can, as detailed information as we can put onto the site for the specific projects as they evolve. That's easy, makes it easy on us for our constituents. So thanks so much for that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Chairwoman Goditis, I've got a question for the director, if I may.
Certainly.
Frank Friedman from Lexington. And one of the things I recall discussing at our meeting in October was the use of technology when there is an accident, either apps or some type of method for directing people traveling down the road. Have you made much progress on that? That's obviously a more granular piece, but just wanted to make sure that was still on the target.
It's a very critical element of this program. For a technology standpoint, so far we have installed additional cameras which help us, not only us, but the public, since they are hosted on BA 511, to see very quickly when an incident has occurred. We have provided additional safety service patrol, which will help respond to those incidents. We are providing 28 additional digital message boards to help alert the traffic, the public. When there is an incident, don't get on the interstate, because that just creates even more problems. We will continue to look for opportunities. Well, before I say look for opportunities with regard to technology, The Arterial projects really are technology based with installation of these smart controllers, quite honestly, up and down the entire corridor on the arterial routes. And then certainly we look for opportunities to work with the private sector when it comes to technology, wayfinding apps, things of that nature. And we hope that as we move forward, some of this information that we're sharing will inform some of these wayfinding apps so that we don't run into issues where the apps are routing trucks down roads that quite honestly they just shouldn't go down. So we are looking for those opportunities wherever we can. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, are we ready to hear from Emily about multimodal improvements now? I think we are. Go ahead, Emily.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm Emily Stock, Manager of Rail Planning, and I am with the Department of Rail and Public Transportation. Of course, Jennifer Mitchell is on the line, our DRPT Director, and Jennifer DeBruhl, our Transit Chief at DRPT, and they may jump in to make comments and answer questions as I go along. So next slide. So I'm here to talk about the work that DRPT has done to identify multimodal improvements in the I-81 corridor as described in the I-81 Corridor Improvement Plan. And through the I-81 Corridor Improvement Plan's public involvement process, over 2,000 comments were received, and 300 of those comments, over 300 of those comments came in saying that there was a lack of multimodal options in the corridor. So DRPT was tasked with identifying potential transit and rail improvements and taking into account existing gaps in service in the corridor. There are, as we all know, lots of trucks on the road and conditions that need to be addressed, and even now that volume is back. So DRPT looked at the tools in our toolbox to provide safe, affordable, and that's the focus of my presentation. Next slide. So this slide shows a snapshot of the multimodal options in the 81 corridor and how they perform. First, I'll talk about the Virginia Breeze bus service, the intercity bus service. Carried 28,855 riders in calendar year 2019, and that is well exceeding the original forecast that only called for 7,000 annual riders. And that's a bus service that's shown in pink here on the slide that goes from Washington, D.C. all the way down to Blacksburg and has daily service. And as far as Amtrak goes, you see the Amtrak routes, passenger routes in light blue, and there were more than 220,000 riders on the I-81 corridor's state-supported Amtrak service. The last 2 years has had consistent 7% growth over that service that goes down to Roanoke now and crosses over into the 29 corridor to hit Lynchburg and Charlottesville up to DC. So we look at this whole network when we look at passenger rail and freight rail for the I-81 corridor. And over 70 million tons of freight is moved by rail each year in this area. So I'll focus on transit improvements first, namely the Virginia Breeze, the intercity bus service that I mentioned before. Thanks for advancing the slide. So DRPT coordinates with local transit systems in the corridor to provide meaningful connections with local transit systems, and that allows for seamless transportation options for intercity bus users, namely the users of the Virginia Breeze bus lines. And this service operates the Valley Flyer daily round trip between Blacksburg and Washington with stops in the Shenandoah Valley, Front Royal, Dulles Airport, and in Arlington. And DRPT studied an extension of the Virginia Breeze intercity bus service into southwestern Virginia, along with new bus stops and critical improvements to existing intercity bus stops along the corridor because of the great success that the service has had in the past. Next slide. So the study that we did looked at 3 different alternatives for extending the service with different numbers of stops, and those are represented in the lines on the bottom of the slides. Route 3, alternative 3, had the fewest number of stops, and that yielded the highest ridership projections due to a more favorable operating time. Alternative 3 is also more favorable from an operational perspective because of limitations on operating hours with a single driver. And there's also been interest in providing a stop at Radford with transit connection to Radford University. So we got some great results from this study. It concluded that alternative 3 would yield a fare box recovery of 83% and an annual ridership increase close to 6%. And the operating and maintenance costs were estimated to be $243,000 annually, and those bus stop improvements that I mentioned at Front Royal and Lexington were estimated to cost $60,000, and adding new bus stops at Bristol, Wytheville, and Salem is estimated to cost about $40,000. So essentially what this does, what this transit improvement would do, is to extend that bus line that stops now at Blacksburg all the way to Bristol every day. So it's a big improvement and to a successful service. Jen DeBrule, do you have any comments on the bus service that I didn't cover?
Hey, Emily, I'll just mention that, that this additional route is seen as an addition. So it would be an additional run. It wouldn't be an extension of the existing Valley Flyer. So it would add more frequency and really double the services provided in the corridor.
Thank you.
I have a question of if this is the right time. When do you expect to move forward with the Bristol line?
So the good part about the Bristol line is that our existing contract with our vendor, who's Coach USA and partnered with Megabus, allows us to do an expansion or to add additional frequencies in the I-81 corridor without having to go back out and recompete that service through an RFP. So we can do that relatively quickly, pending the availability of funding. COVID has certainly impacted our ridership, but this particular corridor, the Valley Flyer, has come back very strong already. Even with our buses operating at 50% capacity, we're having to add additional buses to meet demand already. So that's a good sign and a good indication that this expansion in the I-81 corridor continue to do quite well, even in a COVID environment. So pending the availability of funding, we could probably get service out in the corridor within about 6 months of that funding being available.
Madam Chair, another question following up on this.
Go ahead, Senator.
Let's see, where $40,000 is the estimated cost to go to Bristol. That comes out of the VDOT's money. This is like a supplement, is that right? Supplemental money that, in addition to what the fare would be, in order to encourage this project, is that right?
Correct. So to have service in Bristol, we would have an annual operating and maintenance cost that's estimated at about $250,000 above the fare box recovery for the route. That's what it takes to make the route run, to get the route operational. To make it more favorable in terms of ridership and really to make it a better experience for the folks that use the service, doing some bus stop improvements, and that's what is shown on here at Bristol, Wytheville, and Salem. So that would be a pad and a bus shelter, a place for people to wait to catch the bus, That for those 3 locations would cost an additional $40,000 in capital improvements. Right now, we don't have that would have to be funded out of the I-81 program.
Okay, so in other words, the only thing the state would have to pay is the capital for the stops. Is that right? Or is there a supplement to the people that run Virginia Breeze to encourage them to do it? Or is this strictly a privately operated facility, and the only thing the state needs to do is provide the locations for the stops? Am I right?
Senator Edwards, that's a great question and a good opportunity to provide some clarification. So the Virginia Breeze is a state contracted intercity bus program. We run the current routes. We have 3 of them using some federal funding that is allocated to the state to support intercity bus transportation to underserved communities, rural communities around the state. That federal funding does help subsidize the operations and maintenance costs of those routes. So that cost that's on the slide, the second bullet, that is an annual operations and maintenance cost estimate. That's essentially a subsidy of that operations and maintenance cost that would need to be funded either through our federal program or from some other source of funding to support the delivery of the route by the provider.
Okay, thank you. It seems like a great idea. I encourage you to move forward as quickly as possible. Thank you.
I had a question. Earlier, Jennifer, wondering about the buses are running at 50% capacity, and yet you are needing to add more buses, 50% capacity because of COVID. And you are adding more buses, and so I'm not quite clear on how that is fitting. So this says a Fairfax recovery of 83%, even with the 50% capacity and adding more buses, it still works out?
No, ma'am. Actually, that 80% rate was calculated prior to COVID, and it was not unusual for us prior to COVID to fill a bus to 100% and add additional buses in the corridor to meet demand. And one prime example is a very heavily trafficked weekends like Thanksgiving. We've run as many as 10 buses up to 100% capacity in one direction to meet demand. So that 83% recovery rate is certainly a pre-COVID calculation. Since COVID, since we're only able to operate with 50% capacity to ensure the ability to provide for physical distancing for our passengers and our operator, we are not able to attain an 83% fare box recovery as long as we are operating under those conditions. We did shut down for a full 3 months due to COVID. We restarted service in July, and our fare box recovery has already rebounded to over 30%. So we are coming back as we see more travel demand increasing in the corridor. And we expect that to return as we're able to return to a more normal operation at some point in the future.
Thank you. Do we have any further questions from the committee?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Delegate, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Earlier in the presentation, Emily mentioned the 70 million tons of freight. I was just curious, is that a static number? Has there been an increase or decrease in rail freight? And what efforts have been out there to increase it if it hasn't?
So that's a number that is an annual number, and it was calculated before COVID. And I'll talk a little bit more about our efforts with regard to freight as I move along in the presentation. But I can also get look for some updated numbers on that as well, if you still have questions.
go right ahead, Emily, and keep educating us.
Okay. Okay, so next slide, rail improvements. So I'll be talking about freight and passenger rail with shared tracks in the corridor. So I have that 70 million stat up there again, moved by rail in the I-81 corridor per year, equal to approximately 3.4 million individual truck shipments. And in the corridor, as most of us are familiar, coal shipments were once dominant on rail in the I-81 corridor, and now those shipments are down, and that leaves capacity for intermodal and merchandise freight, and that includes agricultural and wood products. And so there have been switching over to passenger rail, and I'll talk a little bit more about freight rail in a minute. But for passenger rail, there have been over 270,000 ons and offs at Amtrak stations in the corridor annually, and that includes our state-supported trains and long-distance and intercity trains operated by Amtrak. And so I can talk a little bit about the services that are available in the corridor. There are state-supported services, the Roanoke train that's Route 46 for Amtrak that has daily service down to Roanoke. And those, when that service was expanded from Lynchburg to Roanoke, the Roanoke train revenues actually exceeded operating costs. And that route had the highest load factor of any Virginia Amtrak route. And with regard to freight, this is home to Norfolk Southern's Crescent Corridor, which is the primary freight route for intermodal and merchandise freight service moving through Virginia between southeast and northeast markets. And the Crescent Corridor provides service to Virginia's inland port in Front Royal. And Virginia's inland port is an intermodal facility that transfers containers brought by rail from the Port of Virginia to trucks or new trains to reach their final destinations, and takes a lot of trucks off the road between the port and that area. And we also have Norfolk Southern's Heartland Corridor that is the railroad's primary east-west route that parallels 460 generally. So we took that into account. And of course, CSX's coal network corridor is in this area as well, including CSX's Shenandoah subdivision. And we have a number of short line railroads in the corridor. I'll talk a little bit about improvements to those in a couple of slides. So next slide. So I talked about what rail does in the corridor, and this is more about what the Commonwealth does to support rail in the corridor. So the Commonwealth has invested approximately $200 million in the corridor for rail since 2006 to increase capacity and network reliability for freight rail and passenger rail. And many of those investments do buoy both services, not just freight, but also passenger, because of the shared use. These investments have created the capacity for double stack clearance. So you'll see double stack trains out there, freight trains out there from time to time, because as a result of this investment. And the investment represents 1.2 billion annual savings to Virginia. That's billion with a B. These are avoided costs from accidents, congestion, and pavement maintenance, which is a huge benefit, obviously, especially in this corridor. So approximately $1 million of that investment was for capacity improvements directly related to extending the passenger rail service from Lynchburg to Roanoke. And in addition to the $200 million investment that I've just been talking about, we also are slated to invest $11 million, which is allocated in the 6-year improvement program now, for capacity improvements at the Virginia Inland Port. So that's the picture on the left here. The next slide has information about DRPT's rail improvement funding sources. And so this gives a breakdown of that $200 million. We have some of these are going to change because, as many of you know, the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority was recently established. And so some of the names of our programs are changing, and some of those programs are going over to the VPRA. But this is taking a look back at the investments that we've made and how successful they've been. We have the Rail Enhancement Fund, which is the first column here. And that fund really goes to Class 1 freight operations. Those are the rail superhighways of the network, so to speak. And these investments also benefit passenger rail because they share infrastructure and benefit from the capacity. Our Rail Preservation Fund, RPF, is focused on short line railroads. These are the last mile connections, kind of like local roads as compared to the road network. And we've invested heavily in the Shenandoah Valley Railroad, the Winchester and Western Railroad since 2006. We've also invested in rail industrial access projects. These are the driveways to individual businesses in the corridor. And so 31 projects benefited from the rail industrial access program, and they do have operating responsibilities. All these programs have operating responsibilities, and so they have taken trucks off of the road as a result of this program. And then the Intercity Passenger Rail Operating and Capital Fund is the fund that I mentioned that actually took care of the improvements for extending service, Amtrak service to Roanoke. And so those were Norfolk Southern mainline capacity improvements and signal upgrades that went into that. And then we do pay every year for Amtrak operating support. And so that's a partnership between Amtrak and the Commonwealth. So this is these are a couple of examples of rail industrial access projects that we've helped to fund in the corridor that have spurred economic development in the region, and that's really why we do what we do. We get a lot of benefits from road conditions, but then also we benefit new jobs and other economic development activity because of these investments. So the Huff Corporation is the first picture here that got a rail industrial access grant of $450,000. And as a result of that, took over 17,000 trucks off the road during a 5-year performance period and added new jobs along the Shenandoah Valley Railroad. And then the Rail Industrial Access Fund Rail Preservation Fund also helped with Shenandoah Valley Railroad operations in the corridor that took over 52,000 trucks off the road between 2009 and 2018. So,
Emily?
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. I think we're a slide behind. I think the slide needs to move forward 1 or 2.
Oh, yes. Okay. So slide 9, corridor. Yes. So these are some pictures of those improvements that were made in the corridor as a result of rail industrial access and rail preservation along the Shenandoah Valley Railroad, the short line. And next slide. I'll talk a little bit about some of the benefits of investing in rail. So why does the Commonwealth invest in rail? And the short answer is that freight and passenger rail supports our economy efficiently and effectively. And so if you've ever seen a presentation about rail in Virginia in the last couple of years, you've seen this slide about benefits that relate to growth of the economy, air quality, safety, and of course the bottom line, saving money. And so as far as growing the economy, we see $2.2 billion in direct annual benefits to the Commonwealth from the freight rail industry. And for passenger rail, $190 million in direct annual benefits. And so that's an active industry in the Commonwealth. Also see air quality benefits as a result of rail. On average, railroads are 4 times more fuel efficient than trucks, and moving freight by rail instead of truck, it generates 75% less greenhouse gas emissions. So it's an important element to the mix as we invest in transportation. And so the total estimated level of rail service in Virginia in previous years has been about 25 billion ton miles. We also experience fewer crashes as a result of rail transport, and we do have less money that is spent when we transport by rail. So those statistics speak for themselves, and obviously this is an efficient way to add another option to the transportation mix in Virginia and in the corridor. So as we looked at conditions, next slide, along I-81 in this area specifically, we really focused in on solutions that would answer some of the questions and fill in some of those gaps that we're experiencing. And we looked at freight, and this is an example of one of the improvements that we're considering for freight. The I-81 Corridor Improvement Plan reported that as the economy's grown, 81 has experienced an increase in traffic and a degradation of the overall performance in the corridor. And so we understand that as freight grows, we will need to be able to look at ways to diversify transportation options. And we found that existing industries with commodities conducive to rail that currently ship by truck present an opportunity to accommodate more freight transportation in the rail by rail in the corridor. So as that shift from coal is happening, there's more capacity for intermodal and merchandise trains in the corridor, and we think that this is a good opportunity to help those industries that could make use of this capacity. And part of the way that we can do this is by investing in intermodal access. We've invested in the Virginia Inland Port, and we've also invested in smaller operations, smaller transload operations in the corridor, including this Huff Industries example that we have another picture of here. And so we think that investing in intermodal transload facilities will really help. So figuring out which businesses can benefit from that and looking for those investment opportunities is an important element. And I'm going to switch over and talk a little bit more about the importance of passenger rail investments. So the next slide has information about that. Passenger rail is a vital lifeline for the corridor, especially for colleges and universities. Virginia Tech and Radford University certainly are benefited from having daily service. And we also understand that this is an economic development benefit as far as the stations go. And we do have an example of successful station in Lynchburg that's connected to this corridor, even though it's not in the I-81 corridor directly. But regional stakeholders that commented for a recent Lynchburg connectivity study mentioned that Amtrak service is an asset for its provision of easy access to Washington, D.C. The access provides value to firms, both by enabling easy business travel and by enhancing the image of the region for young talent interested in proximity to major urban centers. So this is a reaction about the rail station in Lynchburg. We think this is translatable in Roanoke and would be in other places of the corridor as well. And Route 46, the service to Roanoke, launched successful service to Lynchburg in 2009. That started actually at the end of the last recession. And the chart that is shown in this slide shows that the demand has stayed very steady over the years since it was introduced, even though it was introduced at the end of a recession. And then, of course, just recently, 2018 and 2019, you see the orange spots on the bar that represent Roanoke service when that service was extended to Roanoke recently. So we've had great success, and we hope to have more as we make improvements to rail capacity in the I-81 corridor. Next slide. So our next steps, we will continue to review potential alternatives for any intercity bus service, for passenger rail and for freight rail improvements. And we will come back to you and quantify the potential benefits of investment and assess the feasibility and prioritize those investments and present recommendations to the I-81 Commission. And that is the end of my talk. I'm happy to answer questions. And of course, Jennifer Mitchell and Jennifer DeBrule are on hand as well.
I have a question, Senator Edwards here.
Go ahead, Senator.
The obvious question. We have $350,000 sitting there to study the line between Roanoke and Christiansburg. Christiansburg is prepared to, they already have a location for the station. People here are anxious to get Amtrak from Roanoke to Christiansburg. When are we going to get it? And I think Ray Smoot probably knows a little bit about this as well as Delegate Hurst and Delegate Rasul. Everybody in our region wants to know, when are we going to get it? What's going on, and what can we do to push it? Is that question clear?
We're looking into it as we speak. I'm going to let Jennifer talk a little bit more about it.
Sure.
Jennifer Mitchell.
Yeah, and thank you, Senator Edwards. It is something we're continuing to work on with Norfolk Southern very actively, and we have also been looking at potential ridership out there in the New River Valley, but we are working with Norfolk Southern now to see what might be needed in order to have an extension or to expand more Amtrak service to that part of the state.
I have a suggestion. Since we passed this Passenger Rail Authority, I understand the state is acquiring some property of CSX on the 95 corridor. Why don't you do the same thing here? Buy the Norfolk Southern track between Roanoke and Christiansburg. Norfolk Southern probably be happy to sell it because they're retrenching. They're not growing. They're retrenching. Why don't you do that? That's just an idea. I don't have no idea what it'll cost. But all about that.
No, it is. We're looking at all different alternatives as we're working with Norfolk Southern on this, and thank you also for mentioning the Passenger Rail Authority. We are in the process of standing that up, but a big part of that is what's needed as well is the expansion of the Long Bridge, which is something that we are working on that. And we'll be starting engineering for that very soon. So, but Senator Edwards, we are looking at all different alternatives as we're working with NS on this.
Well, anything I can do to help you, please let me know. I know a little bit about railroads, and Roanoke is a railroad town, but everybody's mad at Norfolk Southern, as you know. They left Roanoke, went to Norfolk. Now they're leaving Norfolk to go to Atlanta. Tell them they need to improve their PR. They need to improve their image around here because everybody's mad at them. Tell them I said so. I think they know it already.
Madam Chair. Madam Chair.
Yes, Delegate Will, go ahead.
Actually, this is Ray Smoot, but thank you, and John, I very much appreciate your comments.
Sorry about that. Sounded very familiar voice to me.
Thank you. I do appreciate John's comments, and also Emily, my understanding is that there's about $200 million within the I-81 improvements budget allocated for multimodal work. Is that correct?
That sounds right. Jennifer Mitchell, can you confirm?
Yeah, that is correct. When the I-81 plan was put together and the $2 billion of highway investments were identified, the plan that was actually approved by the CTB does include an additional $200 million that could be used for multimodal improvements, or I believe some other truck parking and operational improvements as well. But the majority of that has been identified for multimodal. So that's why we've put this presentation together. We are looking at all different alternatives for both freight and passenger service, intercity bus service. Any final recommendations or projects that are recommended funded out of that additional funds and not the funds that have been already programmed for the highway projects.
Jennifer, thank you.
Madam Chair, this is Nick.
Go ahead, Nick.
I just want to offer one quick clarification on Director Mitchell's comments to Mr. Smoot's question. $200 million was set aside in total for operational improvements, multimodal improvements, truck parking, and speed enforcement. But $43 million of that has already been allocated to operational improvements. So the total amount that is remaining over the kind of original corridor improvement program times $7 million now, because that 43 has already been allocated by VDOT to operational improvements that they're currently implementing. So just minor clarification.
Thank you, Nick. I have a quick question, and it might involve Nick as well. In these numbers of how many trucks have been taken out off the road by rail in recent years, it's fantastic to hear that. But are we really seeing a measurable distance of truck traffic on 81 directly related to the improvement in rail?
So Madam Chair, this is Nick. I'll start, and then I'll let Director Mitchell also chime in. I think we know that those are in a lot of cases, goods that are being produced along the 81 corridor. So if you look at the Hoff Industries that Emily Stock talked about, there's also the interchange cold food storage in north of Harrisonburg, in the Harrisonburg area there. And again, those are products that are being produced along the corridor that are currently moving by rail. And so I think what we're seeing in some cases is increased economic activity that is then with new products that are being moved by rail. So you have a truck that otherwise would have been on 81 that's not being on there, while in some of these other cases, it is trucks that were there that have kind of been diverted. But I'll also let Director Mitchell kind of chime in there.
Sure, and as Deputy Secretary Donahue mentioned, many of the goods that are being moved with the projects in these programs are ones that are being produced in the corridor. We have seen some studies where we've estimated that up to 9% of I would say the reduction in truck traffic could be up to 9% as a result of the rail investments that we have in the corridor. And those are the rail investments that we've had over the last 10 years.
It looks like we may have lost Madam Chair.
Okay, I guess while we're waiting, I'm happy to take any other questions about the multimodal presentation. All right, thanks.
Hey, Senator Edwards, do you want to hop in and keep us going?
Yeah, okay. The next on the agenda, if nobody has any further questions on, I guess we're going to truck parking, is that right? Kathy McGee?
Yes, sir.
Parking?
That's right.
Okay. Go ahead. All right, go ahead. Kathy McGee here?
I'm here. Thank you so much for having me here to speak to you about truck parking. It's an interesting transition from the conversation we've been having about rail, and I guess I would report that despite all the improvements in rail, there's still a great need for movement of freight by truck and support for that movement through truck parking in the corridor. As you all know, the I-81 corridor improvement plan included a truck parking study as an appendix, and that study reviewed parking capacity and demand within the corridor and offered a number of recommendations. Among those recommendations was the formation of a truck parking task force to address truck parking challenges. And so I'm here to report on that task force. Next slide, please. As I get started, I just want to remind you of some of the background that was presented in that I-81 corridor study. Just to briefly highlight the current conditions for truck parking in the corridor, you can see we currently have approximately 3,400 spaces, truck parking spaces available throughout the corridor from end to end. The study did model demand for truck parking, and again, it's modeled demand, and they put that estimate at approximately 4,400 spaces. So you can see we're short just shy of 950 spaces for truck parking from the southern end to the northern end of the corridor. Next slide, please. What you don't see in the table that I just shared with you is sort of the distribution of that need. So I wanted to highlight this map that also was a part of the I-81 study, and it clearly highlights.
Madam Chair, this is Delegate Will.
Yes, Delegate.
I mean, the sound's terrible. It's echoing, and I'm not sure what's going on there.
Okay, can everyone please mute? And I would ask Kathy, are you on 2 devices by any chance, or?
I am not, no.
Okay, well, make sure everyone is muted, please, and let's give it another go.
Okay, is it any better now? Okay, well, I'll keep going and you tell me if it's not better. So this map illustrates the parking demand, the need, from one end of the corridor to the other. And you can see that it's different in the southbound direction and the northbound direction. The area of greatest need identified was at the southernmost end of the southbound I-81 corridor. But there is need distributed throughout the corridor. One of the interesting factors here is that when the need was modeled, it really was confined to Virginia. And so this need, great need at the southern end here could be reflective of parking challenges in Tennessee. And so the Truck Parking Task Force will be looking at what we could do potentially in partnership with our neighboring states as we address parking demand. Next slide, please. Continuing with the findings of the I-81 study, I would point out that parking in the corridor is primarily provided in private facilities. It is approximately a 9-to-1 ratio of private to public spaces provided. And interviews with drivers did indicate that they do prefer those private travel centers because of the services and amenities that are available in those facilities. Federal law does restrict the services that can be provided in public rest areas, although anyone who travels the I-81 corridor would certainly recognize that they are heavily used. The study did find a number of rest areas along the I-81 corridor that could be reconfigured to provide additional spaces, but even so, there will be need to significantly expand private capacity as well. Next slide, please. So again, looking at the opportunities that were identified in the study, there are 5 rest areas that we believe can be reconfigured to provide additional spaces. Design work is already underway at the Troutville rest area to provide additional spaces. We're also looking at how we can work with private parking facilities to incentivize the increase of supply, and looking at technology applications that will provide information to drivers about real-time parking availability and the capability to reserve spaces throughout the facilities in the corridor. Next slide, please. So the Truck Parking Task Force is made up of a number of entities, including the Virginia Trucking Association, the Owner-Operator Independent Driver Association, the National Association of Truck Stop Owners, a number of private truck stop owners in the corridor, trucking companies that operate in the corridor. Regional.
Someone needs to mute. Nick, do you need to mute?
Regional planning organizations, and they play a key role, obviously, in helping to determine what local restrictions or regulations we may need to work with to expand truck parking. The I-81 Corridor Coalition and Eastern Transportation Coalition, again, to help facilitate collaboration with neighboring states. And then DMV, Virginia State Police, and VDOT are actively involved in the task force as well. Next slide, please. The task force has a number of goals before it. The first is to understand the needs of commercial vehicle operators as it relates to truck parking. You know, what do they need? What services do they most want in a parking facility? And what is the appropriate mix of full service versus minimal service? In other words, how much of the parking demand could be met in public facilities with minimal services provided? Evaluate the options for meeting these needs for additional capacity through public investment, private investment, and the potential for public-private partnerships, and to fully understand what the hurdles are to expanding parking capacity. And then finally, to determine the need for and methods to provide information on truck parking availability in real time. How do truck drivers want to receive this information, and how important to them is the ability to reserve spaces in advance? Next slide, please. In terms of a schedule, the task force has met once and will meet for the second time next week. We'll continue to meet every other month to work through those goals that I just spoke about. At our next meeting, we will begin at the southern end of the corridor, working our way north, looking for opportunities to expand parking capacity, both in public and private sector facilities. We'll be coming back to this committee in the summer with recommendations on what we believe are the right steps to take to address the truck parking issue. And that is the end of my presentation. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Kathy. Do we have any questions for Kathy about truck parking?
John Edwards here. I noticed since I travel 81 and 64 on seemingly a more regular basis than I really want to in the last 2 months, especially with that special session, I've noticed that a lot more trucks, and you've noted the fact that a lot more truck traffic and a lot more trucks in the parking areas and the public parking areas especially are busy all the time. And so I think this is an important part of what we're doing. So
I completely agree, and thank you for your work, Kathy. Any further questions or comments? If no, then I think we'll go ahead and hear from Laura Farmer, Chief Financial Officer at VDOT. She will give us a financial overview.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Can you hear me okay?
hear you.
Great, thank you so much. This morning, I'm going to provide an update on the I-81 improvement program, both the fund, its status, and where we go from here. If you could advance to the next slide. I'm going to talk a little bit about fiscal year 2020, how the revenue that is dedicated to the fund performed against the estimates, give a legislative update on the changes to the program and how that affects the finances of the program. Outline for you the proposed funding structure of the 81 corridor projects, give an overview of what we believe our current debt issuance plan is and our next steps. Next slide, please. So for fiscal year 2020, the fund received $93 million. It's made up of several components that were dedicated to the fund in the year. The regional fuels estimate exceeded expectations with just below $70 million worth of collections compared to an estimate of 55. The truck registration fees, these estimates for both this as well as the road tax were altered in February during the General Assembly session based on new information from DMV. Both fell slightly short of estimates. With regard to the licensing fees, we believe a significant part of that has to do with the credentials being extended during the pandemic in the latter quarter of the year, and so collections were down as a result. Sorry. And with regard to expenditures, VDOT expended just shy of $8 million through the fiscal year with a remaining balance of about $85.5 million in cash as we close the books on the fiscal year. Next slide, please. So the governor's omnibus legislation from this past General Assembly session made a couple of changes that affect the I-81 program. The biggest benefit to the program is the authorization of the debt with an aggregate principal amount not to exceed $1 billion. It also updated the localities that are contributing fuel tax revenue to the I-81 corridor. Those localities are just limited now to those where 81 passes through it, or is a city in which it is wholly encompassed by a county in which I-81 passes. So there are several localities who shifted their fuel tax revenues are now dedicated to the construction district grant program in which they reside. Separately, funding for the 81 corridor is provided through the Interstate Operations and Enhancement Program. So the fuel tax revenue continues to be dedicated directly to the 81 program, but those other statewide taxes I mentioned in the previous slide, the license fees for trucks, as well as the road tax in the future, were dedicated to the parent Commonwealth Transportation Fund, and then funds that are available flow through to our construction distribution and arrive in the Interstate Operations and Enhancement Program for the I-81 corridor. The work done for this legislation sized those revenues and the allocations to meet the expectations that were already set for the interstate program. And even with the adjustments that we've made to deal with COVID-19, and as the Secretary mentioned in her opening comments, we have sized our interstate expectations with what was expected when we adopted a 6-year program last summer prior to the COVID-19 effects on the program. Next slide. This slide provides a pictorial structure of how we envision the 81 funding will work as we move into the debt financing component of the overall program. So 81 will receive dedicated regional revenues, regional fuels tax revenues, and an allocation from the interstate program. And both of those components are available for the I-81 corridor improvements. The regional fuels tax will be completely dedicated and available to pay debt service, as well as pay-go items on projects. And then the allocations from the interstate program are available for the pay-go components of the program. And both of those components feed into the overall funding for the I-81 improvement plan. Next slide, please. Our current debt issuance plan calls for an issuance of senior lien bonds dedicated that are dedicated debt service from the fuel tax revenue, and then a subsequent junior lien action, either a mix of municipal bonds, and we still are planning to pursue the TIFIA program. The rule eligibility is ideal for this I-81 program. We covered some features of that in the previous committee meeting, and that's available in those materials. But we continue to work on that angle to get the cheapest financing available to advance these projects according to their original schedules. The issuance timing, as well as the amounts that we pursue, will match the project's payments, the payout needs of the projects, and the readiness to use those bond proceeds or loan proceeds for TIFIA. Next slide, please. In terms of next steps, we're currently updating our financial model with the latest project estimates and schedules. As Dave went through earlier this morning, that has become a better picture as time passes and projects are awarded. In addition, we hope to have a better long-term picture when the December revenue estimates are available. Just like the Secretary mentioned earlier this morning, we got 2 years worth of estimates we felt confident to move forward with in this area. And so we hope that in the coming weeks, we'll have a better idea of the long-term projections for 81, but do feel confident that we'll be able to continue to keep the projects on schedule with the assumptions we have today. We will re-engage the indicative rating processes with the rating agencies. We had started that process within the last year as we worked to secure the debt authorization with the General Assembly. We'll re-engage that with regard to changes in the program since that happened, and begin working with TIFIA on the loan program. With a potential municipal bond issuance later within the next 6 months to a year, we'll work on the documents and associated approvals that are needed to issue those bonds. And then we will incorporate the use of the debt in our 6-year program update, which will happen this spring and hopefully be adopted in June of 2021 for our fiscal year 2022 update. That concludes my prepared remarks. I'll be happy to take any questions.
Madam Chair.
Thank you, Laura. And yes, do we have a question from Delegate Wilt?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, Laura, you mentioned in your presentation, well, I actually have 2 questions. You mentioned the legislative change that occurred as far as the funding goes, and the localities that are now exempt that are in the planning districts, but the 81 doesn't actually go through them, that now they're exempt from paying into the total fund. Can you tell us what the fiscal impact that is going to have going forward, as far as how many dollars is that taking out of the 81 fund?
Yes, sir. Based on fiscal year 2020 collections, those localities transitioned out of I-81. Their total collections was about $11.4 million of the fuel tax revenue of that 69 that I mentioned earlier in the presentation. So that's about 16% of total collections last fiscal year. But I'd like to mention that this that was provided by the Department assumes that adjustment going forward.
Thank you. Madam Chair, second question.
Go ahead, Delegate.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, Laura, could at some point we be provided a breakdown, the revenues collected in gas taxes versus diesel taxes? I mean, from earlier slides, it looks like trucking's still pretty heavy in the corridor, And so, assuming that, lion's share of that's coming from diesel taxes. But yeah, just looking for that figure. Could that be provided at some point?
Yes, sir. I believe I have ready access to total collections by locality. The breakdown between gas and diesel, I will do some follow-up with tax and DMV to see if that can be provided.
That would be great, and I'm sure everyone here would be interested in that. Thank you, Laura. Do we have any further questions for Laura? All right, sounds like we are ready to move on to our public comment period. If there are people out there from the public wishing to speak, you are going to be timed and limited to 3 minutes or less. Ronnie?
Good morning. This is the public caller bridge speaking. I confirm that there are 0 public callers that wish to comment at this time.
Thank you. I guess that makes it easy for us. Do we have any comments or questions from committee members for any of our speakers?
Madam Chair, this is Bill Bestfitch from Roanoke. Can the speakers tell us when their PowerPoint presentations will be uploaded to the website, the Improve 81 website?
Mr. Bestwitz, I actually can answer that question for you. This is Renique. We will have these presentations up as soon as this meeting adjourns.
And will a video recording of the meeting be available as well?
I will need to confirm that. I believe it will be, but I will confirm.
Thanks very much, Rooney.
Thank you for that question. That's valuable information for all of us. Did I hear someone else?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Senator Edwards here.
Go ahead, Senator.
Mentioning this year we did extraordinary work in the General Assembly with regard to transportation. We had a transportation package that's the best we've had since 1986. It's very comprehensive. And I want to thank the governor, the secretary, members of VDOT, and the members of the General Assembly for pushing forward with this extraordinary transportation package, which increased the gas tax and so many things. So I just think that should be mentioned, the tremendous work the General Assembly did in a massive transportation package. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. And yes, I concur. Over the last several sessions, actually, we've made huge progress in transportation. And it's especially gratifying for me living in the West to have made such progress in listening to the problems and addressing the problems in the West as well as the East. So it was really, really important and really gratifying. Do we have any other comments or questions from anyone on the committee?
Madam Chair, this is Renique. I just wanted to go ahead and confirm that there will be a recording up. It'll take a few days, but it will be up.
Thank you, Renique. All right, I guess it is left to me to make some closing remarks. And I think for me, my view of this job as a member of the House of Delegates, member of the General Assembly, the biggest part of my job is to be open to being educated by people who know what they're doing, by people who are out there doing the research and doing the work, and the experts in the field. And when I have the privilege of sitting in on a meeting like this, I learn so much. And today, everything we learned has been so good. It's all very, very positive. COVID seems to have done very little damage, if any, to the progress on improvements to 81. I am especially excited about the rail improvements and the progress we've made in transferring load to rail. For me, it's been a lifelong frustration that so many railroads were ripped up by the car companies. So, and we have lost the opportunity to cut down on pollution in so many ways. So the rail improvements are huge. I live right down the road from the inland port. We are making such progress in so many directions, but it is particularly gratifying to hear from the people who are doing the work and doing such great work. And it's an honor to have been voted to chair this committee. I will do everything I can do to keep things running smoothly. I will rely again on the experts to tell me what's needed at all times. But thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for being here. And with that, I guess we will adjourn. Thanks, everyone, and have a wonderful day. It's beautiful out there.